3 days after we brought our baby home, the hospital called us. At first, I thought it was just a routine call. Maybe they wanted to check if we were adjusting. Maybe they had some recommendations for the baby's first days at home. But there was something strange in the nurse's voice. She sounded nervous. Very nervous. "Mrs. Sabrina?" she asked. "Yes, this is she." There was a pause that lasted too long. Then she said, "Could you come back to the hospital today?" I frowned. I looked at Peter, who was sitting on the living room couch, carefully holding our baby. He was completely focused on the tiny face sleeping peacefully in his arms. It was our 3rd night at home. Everything still felt surreal. "Come back to the hospital?" I asked. "Did something happen?" The nurse took a moment before answering. "There is a problem." My heart tightened immediately. "With the baby?" Silence. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "Not exactly." Peter noticed my expression and stood up. "What's wrong?" he asked. I put the phone on speaker. "Mrs. Sabrina," the nurse continued, "we need you to come to the hospital immediately." "But why?" More silence. And then she said the words that would change everything. "Because there is a problem with the baby's birth records." Peter frowned. "What kind of problem?" The nurse took a deep breath. "According to the hospital system." She hesitated. There is no record that this baby was born here." Silence filled the room. I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. "That doesn't make any sense," I said. Peter looked at me. "Of course it doesn't. Our son was sleeping in his arms, small, perfect, real." "It must be a mistake," I whispered. The nurse sounded almost desperate. "Please, come to the hospital." And she hung up. Peter and I stayed silent for a few seconds. "This is ridiculous," he finally said. "I know." But something inside me couldn't ignore that strange feeling, as if that phone call was only the beginning of something much worse. But a few days before that, our life seemed perfect. Peter and I had been trying to have a baby for almost 4 years. 4 years of hope, 4 years of medical tests, 4 years of frustration. There were moments when it felt impossible. I remember one specific night. We were sitting in the kitchen. A pregnancy test was lying on the table. Negative, once again. Peter held my hand. "Don't give up," he said. "I'm tired," I replied. "I know." He pulled me into a hug. "But one day it will happen." At that moment, I didn't know if I believed him. But a few months later, it happened. It was a quiet morning. Peter had already left for work. I was alone in the bathroom holding a pregnancy test. I almost didn't want to look. I was tired of false hope, but when I finally turned the test over, I saw 2 lines. 2 clear lines. 2 impossible lines. I stared at them for almost a minute, without breathing, without moving. Then I started crying. When Peter came home that night, he found me sitting on the couch, holding the test. "Sabrina?" he asked. I slowly raised the test. He looked at it. It took him a few seconds to understand. Then his eyes widened. "Wait." He took the test from my hands. "Does this mean?" I simply nodded. Peter started laughing, a nervous, disbelieving laugh. Then he hugged me so tightly we almost lost our balance. "We're going to have a baby." At that moment, after so many years waiting, it finally felt real. The following months passed like a dream. Peter changed completely. He researched everything about pregnancy. "Did you know the baby can already hear your voice?" he said one day. "Peter, you're studying this like it's a university course." He shrugged. "I just want to do everything right." But the most special moment happened when we started preparing the baby's room. Peter insisted on painting the room himself. "We can hire someone," I suggested. "No way." He showed up wearing old clothes and holding a paintbrush. "This room is going to be perfect." We chose a soft blue color, calm, warm. We bought a small wooden crib, a rocking chair near the window, tiny clothes folded neatly in the drawers. Sometimes we would sit in the room just imagining what it would be like when the baby arrived. Peter would place his hand on my belly. When the baby moved, his face would light up. It was pure happiness. And then the night came, the night that changed everything. I woke up with a strange feeling, pressure, warmth. Then I realized my water had broken. "Peter?" He opened his eyes immediately. "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath. "It's time." Peter jumped out of bed. "Now?" "Now." He ran around the room looking for the hospital bag. "Where's the bag?" "On the chair." "Okay." A few minutes later, we were in the car. The streets were almost empty. Peter drove with intense focus. "Breathe," he kept saying. "I am breathing." Another contraction came. I gripped the seat. "Maybe not that well." Peter laughed nervously. The maternity ward lights appeared ahead. At that moment, I felt something impossible to explain. Fear, joy, anticipation. Because I knew that when we left that hospital, our lives would be completely different. And they would be, but not in the way we imagined. Because 3 days later, the hospital would call again and tell us something impossible, that there was no record that our baby had been born there. When we arrived at the maternity hospital that early morning, everything seemed to happen too fast. Peter parked the car almost running. A nurse appeared at the automatic door before we had even fully entered. "First pregnancy?" she asked. Peter answered immediately. "Yes." I could barely speak at that moment. Another contraction came, strong. The nurse held my arm. "It's okay. We're going to take care of you." She guided us through a hallway that felt far too bright. That typical white hospital light. It smelled like disinfectant. Machines beeped somewhere in the distance. Peter walked beside me, holding my hand. "Everything is okay," he kept repeating. "I know." But in that moment, it felt like the entire world had turned into pain and anxiety. They placed me in a wheelchair. As they pushed me through the hallways, I remember thinking something strange. There weren't many people there. It was early morning, of course, but even so, it felt too quiet. The nurse pushed the chair into a room. "Here we'll run the first exams." Peter stayed by my side the entire time, holding my hand. "I'm here," he said. I took deep breaths, trying to focus. Another contraction. Stronger. "Okay," the nurse said. "It looks like this baby is in a hurry." Peter smiled nervously. "He takes after his father." She laughed. But now that I think about it, there is something strange about that memory. I can't remember that nurse's face. Not clearly. Only the uniform. And the calm voice. Sometime later, they took us to the delivery room. That part of the hospital corridor seemed darker, less busy. Peter noticed it. "It's kind of empty here, don't you think?" The nurse replied quickly. "Quiet night." That seemed to make sense. At that moment, nothing really seemed out of the ordinary. I was too busy trying to deal with the contractions. When we entered the room, there were only 2 people there, a doctor and another nurse. The doctor seemed calm, confident. "Hello, Sabrina," he said. "I'm Dr. Mendes." He glanced quickly at a tablet in his hands. "First child?" "Yes," Peter answered. The doctor smiled. Then let's bring this little one into the world. And the next few hours passed like a blur. Bright lights, instructions, breathing, pain. Peter holding my hand. "You can do this," he kept saying. I tried to believe him. The nurse said, "Breathe." Another contraction. Push. Time seemed to bend. Minutes turned into hours. Hours turned into seconds. And then it happened. A cry. Small, fragile, but perfect. The doctor lifted the baby. "Congratulations." He smiled. "It's a boy." Peter stood completely still. For a few seconds he seemed unable to speak. Then his eyes filled with tears. "We did it," he whispered. When they placed the baby in my arms, I felt something impossible to describe. He was so small, so warm, so real. Peter leaned beside me. "He's perfect." I nodded. At that moment, it felt like all the years of waiting, all the difficulties, had been worth it. After that, everything became calmer, or at least it seemed that way. They took the baby to do the initial exams. A nurse appeared a few minutes later. "He's doing great," she smiled. "Very healthy." Peter couldn't stop smiling. "Can I hold him?" "Of course." She carefully placed the baby in his arms. Peter looked at the tiny face with almost reverent care. "Hello, champ." I watched that moment with tears in my eyes. Everything felt perfect. But now, when I remember that night, there are things that don't make sense. Small details, things that seemed normal at the time. But now, they give me chills. For example, I don't remember seeing any other patient in that hallway. No other family, no other nurses passing by. I also don't remember anyone asking for my documents after we arrived, not even when I was admitted. And Dr. Mendez, the doctor who delivered the baby, I never saw him again. Not that night. Not in the following days. After the birth, they took us to a room. It was small, but comfortable. Peter sat in the chair beside the bed holding the baby. He couldn't stop looking at him. "He has your eyes," Peter said. "It's too early to tell." "No, I'm sure. We spent hours just watching our son sleep." The world finally felt complete. The next morning, a few nurses entered the room to check the baby. At least, I think they were nurses. Now I'm not so sure. They spoke very little. They did a few quick tests and said everything was fine. "You can go home tomorrow," one of them said. Peter squeezed my hand. Our first night as a family. I smiled, without imagining that that night would be the beginning of something no one could explain. But 2 days later, we left the hospital. Peter carefully placed the baby in the car seat. He drove slowly, as if any sudden movement could break that moment. "I still can't believe it," he said. "Me neither." When we arrived home, the baby's room was exactly as we had prepared it. The crib, the rocking chair, the tiny folded clothes. Peter placed the baby in the crib for the first time. We stood there watching, in silence. "Our family," he said. But 3 days later, the phone would ring, and someone from the hospital would tell us something impossible, that this baby had never been born there. The drive to the hospital felt much longer than it actually was. Peter drove in silence. The baby slept in the car seat in the back. I kept looking at him through the rearview mirror, trying to convince my own heart that all of this was just an administrative mistake. Hospitals make mistakes. Systems fail. Records disappear. It happens. I repeated those sentences in my head like a mantra, but deep down something didn't feel right. "Are you okay?" Peter asked. "I am," This must just be a system error. I know, but my voice didn't sound as confident as I wished. A few minutes later, the hospital appeared ahead. The same building, the same white lights. But now it looked different. Colder. Quieter. Peter parked the car and quickly got out to open my door. "We'll solve this in a few minutes," he said. I carefully picked up the baby. He was still sleeping, peaceful, unaware of everything that was happening. We entered through the main door. The reception area was lit, but almost empty. A single receptionist sat behind the desk. She looked up when we approached. "Good evening." Peter spoke first. We received a call from the hospital asking us to come back. The woman typed something into the computer. Name? Sabrina and Peter. She looked at the screen for a few seconds, then slightly frowned. "One moment." She picked up the phone and said something quietly, then hung up. "A doctor will come speak with you." We sat in a small waiting area. My heart was beating faster and faster. Peter looked around. Strange. What? It feels different. Different how? I can't explain. But he was right. I felt it too. The hospital looked the same. But at the same time, it didn't. A few minutes later, a man appeared in the hallway. A doctor. He looked serious. Very serious. "Mrs. Sabrina?" I stood up. "Yes, I'm Dr. Henrique." He gestured for us to follow him. "Please, come with me." We followed the doctor down a long hallway. My hands began to sweat. "What exactly is happening?" Peter asked. The doctor took a moment before answering. "We're trying to understand that as well." He opened the door to a small room. "Please, sit down." We sat. The baby continued sleeping. The doctor pulled a chair and sat in front of us. He looked uncomfortable. "I'll be direct," he said. "Please," Peter replied. The doctor placed some papers on the table. We checked all the hospital records. "And we found no record of your delivery." Peter let out a small nervous laugh. "That's impossible." "I agree. I gave birth here," I said. "I know that's what you said." "That's not what I said," I replied firmly. "That's what happened." The doctor took a deep breath. "I understand." He turned the computer screen toward us. "This is the maternity record system." He typed my name. Nothing appeared. "We tried every possible variation." He typed again. "We also checked emergency admissions. Nothing." Peter ran his hand through his hair. "So where is the record?" "That's exactly the question we're trying to answer." The doctor opened another page in the system. We also checked the doctors who were on duty that night. My heart began racing. The doctor who delivered my baby was named Dr. Mendez. The doctor stopped typing. "Dr. Mendez?" "Yes." He turned the monitor again. "There is no doctor with that name working in this hospital." Silence fell over the room. My body turned cold. "That doesn't make sense," Peter said. "I agree. He was there." "Can you describe him?" I tried to remember. But something strange happened. The harder I tried, the harder it became. He was tall. Approximate age? I'm not sure. Peter spoke. He looked around 40. The doctor wrote something down. We checked all the doctors who were on duty that night. He turned the screen again. None of them are named Mendez. Peter leaned forward. "And the delivery room? What about it? Can we see the room where she gave birth?" The doctor hesitated. "Yes." He stood up. "Come with me." We left the room and walked down the hallway. My heart was racing. I knew that place. I had been there. I remembered the light, the machines, the pain, the nurses' voices. But something inside me started whispering something disturbing. What if It didn't happen here? The doctor stopped in front of a large map on the wall. This is the maternity ward map. He pointed to several rooms. Here are all the delivery rooms. Peter looked at me. What was the room number? I don't remember. Can you recognize it? I stepped closer to the map. I looked at each number, each hallway, but none of them seemed familiar. My voice failed. I don't know. Peter pointed to a room. Maybe this one? The doctor shook his head. That room was under maintenance that night. Peter pointed to another. And this one? It was occupied with another delivery. The doctor sighed. All rooms are registered in the system. He turned the map toward us. But none of them have a record of you being here. My heart began pounding. That's not possible. Mrs. Sabrina, I was here. I understand what you're saying. I remember the delivery. Peter held my hand. Calm down. But then the doctor said something that made everything worse. There's something else. Peter looked at him. What? We checked the security cameras. My stomach tightened. And? The doctor looked even more tense now. There is no footage of you entering the maternity ward that night. The silence was absolute. That's impossible, Peter said. I agree. We came in here. Yes. You're saying the cameras don't show that? They don't. My heart started beating so hard I could hear it inside my head. Then where did I give birth? The doctor didn't answer immediately. He seemed to choose his words carefully. That's exactly the question we're trying to answer. At that moment, the hallway door opened. A security guard appeared. Doctor. Yes. The police have arrived. Peter frowned. Police. The doctor nodded. Yes, my whole body went cold. Why? The doctor looked directly at the baby in my arms. Then he said something that made the world stop. Because 3 days ago, a baby disappeared from another hospital in the city, and now they want to see this child. The silence inside that room felt suffocating. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the baby's soft breathing in the car seat beside me. Peter was the first to break the silence. This is absurd, he said, looking directly at Roberto. The hospital administrator kept a serious expression. I understand how this sounds. No, Peter replied. You don't understand. He pointed at me. My wife gave birth here. I'm not saying she didn't give birth, Roberto said calmly. Then what are you saying? Roberto took a deep breath. I'm saying we found no evidence that it happened in this hospital. A chill ran down my spine. But I remember, I said. My voice trembled. I remember the birth. I believe that you believe that, Roberto replied. The way he said that made something inside me break. Peter noticed immediately. Hey, he said, holding my hand. Calm down. But before any of us could say anything else, the door opened again. This time 2 people walked in, a man and a woman, both wearing formal clothes, police badges on their belts. My heart began racing. Good afternoon, the man said. I'm Detective Marcos Vieira. He pointed to the woman beside him. And this is Detective Carla Noguera. Peter immediately became defensive. What's going on here? Detective Marcos looked at me first, then at the baby, then back at us. We received a call from the hospital regarding a possible connection to a case we are investigating. What case? Peter asked. Marcos answered directly. A newborn baby disappeared 3 days ago. My whole body stiffened. Disappeared? I repeated. Yes. Detective Carla placed a tablet on the table. The baby disappeared from the maternity ward at St. Lucas Hospital. She tapped the screen. A photo appeared. A newborn, wrapped in a light blue blanket. My heart began racing, because that baby looked exactly like the baby in the car seat beside me. Peter noticed it too. "Many babies look alike," he said quickly. Carla nodded. "That's true." She zoomed in. "But there are some details that caught our attention." She pointed at the screen, like this small birthmark behind the ear. My heart almost stopped. Slowly, I leaned over the car seat, moved the blanket slightly, and looked behind the baby's ear. A small pale mark was there, exactly in the same place. The air disappeared from my lungs. Peter saw it too. He froze. "That doesn't prove anything," he said finally, but his voice was no longer confident. Detective Marcos spoke calmly. "No one is saying you did anything wrong." "Then what are you saying?" Peter asked. "That we need to find out what really happened that night." The detective's words kept echoing in my head. "You never appeared entering this hospital that night." For a few seconds, no one said anything. Peter was the first to react. "That's impossible." His voice was firm, but I could hear the tension behind it. "We were here," he continued. "I brought my wife to this maternity ward." Detective Marcos crossed his arms. "I'm not saying you don't believe that. While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease." "This isn't about believing," Peter replied. "It happened." Detective Carla slid the tablet across the table. "We analyzed all the hospital's external cameras." She zoomed in on several images: entrances, hallways, reception. Between midnight and 5 a.m, every person who entered the hospital was recorded. Peter leaned forward. "And us?" Carla slowly shook her head. "You don't appear in any of them." The silence that followed felt too heavy to breathe. I felt my fingers tightening around the baby's blanket without realizing it. "That can't be right," I whispered. Roberto, the hospital administrator, looked just as disturbed. "We checked 3 times. Peter ran his hand through his hair. "So you're saying my wife simply appeared inside the hospital without entering?" No one answered, because everyone knew that made no sense. The baby moved in my arms. A small sound escaped his mouth. Instinctively, I began rocking him. "It's okay," I whispered. But I wasn't just talking to him. I was trying to convince myself. Peter looked at me. His eyes were full of concern. "Sabrina." "What? Do you remember the way we got here that night?" I closed my eyes for a moment. I tried to rebuild the memory. The car, the empty streets, the maternity lights. "We parked in front," I said. Peter nodded. "I remember that too." We entered through the main door. I could see the scene in my mind. The automatic doors opening, the hallway, the nurse. But when I tried to focus on the details, something strange happened. The images began to blur, fragmented. "I can't remember clearly," I said. Carla watched carefully. "That can happen during situations of intense stress." "Giving birth is an intense situation," Peter replied. "Yes, but Marcos seemed to be thinking about something else." "There's another possibility," he said. Peter frowned. "What? That you didn't enter through the main door?" Silence returned. Peter let out a small, incredulous laugh. "Of course we did." Marcos turned the tablet again. "There are other entrances to the hospital." He showed a map of the building. Ambulance entrance, staff entrance, and the emergency wing. Peter studied the map. "You think we were brought in by ambulance?" Marcos shrugged. "We're considering every possibility." Roberto spoke for the first time since the detectives arrived. If someone wanted to enter the hospital without being recorded, they would probably use the emergency entrance. Carla made a few notes. We've already requested access to the cameras in that area. Peter sighed. This is getting ridiculous. I couldn't disagree, because everything felt completely impossible. Then Marcos asked another question, a question that made me even more uncomfortable. Sabrina, did you receive any medication during labor? I frowned. I think so. What kind? I don't know. Did you sign any documents? I tried to remember. Paper, a pen, a nurse explaining something. But again, the memories were unclear. Maybe, I answered. Marcos exchanged a quick glance with Carla. Why does that matter? Peter asked. Carla answered calmly. Some medications can affect short-term memory. Peter stiffened. Are you suggesting someone drugged my wife? We're not suggesting anything yet, but the mere possibility made a deep chill run through me. Roberto stood up from the chair. Maybe we should check the medical records. Peter immediately agreed. Yes, do that. Roberto left the room. As soon as the door closed, silence returned. The baby was sleeping again, completely unaware of the tension around him. Peter gently stroked the baby's head. He's ours, he said quietly. I knew he was trying to convince himself. I needed to believe it too, because the alternative was unbearable. And a few minutes later, Roberto returned. But something in his expression made my heart race. He looked paler than before. I checked the medical files, he said. Peter immediately asked, And? Roberto hesitated. There is no admission record under Sabrina's name that night. The world began spinning. That's impossible. I know. Peter stood up abruptly. Then someone erased the records. Marcos crossed his arms. That's possible. Possible? Peter pointed at me. My wife gave birth here. Roberto answered carefully. Sir, if a birth happened in this hospital that night, someone did an extremely thorough job hiding every piece of evidence. Carla looked again at the tablet. There's one last thing. Everyone looked at her. She zoomed into another camera image. We found this footage in the staff parking area. The image showed a car, a dark sedan, parking near a side entrance of the hospital. The video quality was poor, but 2 people could be seen inside the car. My heart began beating faster. What time was this? Peter asked. 2:47 a.m. Peter froze, because that was exactly the time we had arrived at the hospital. Can you zoom in more? He asked. Carla adjusted the image. The driver's face became slightly clearer. My stomach dropped, because I recognized that profile immediately. Peter, I whispered. He had seen it too. The man driving the car was him. The silence in the room became heavy. Marcos looked carefully at Peter. Is that your car? Peter took a few seconds to answer. It looks like it. Carla zoomed in further. Now the passenger seat was visible. A woman sat there. Pregnant. Very pregnant. My heart started racing. That's me, I said. No one answered, but everyone knew I was right. Marcos took a deep breath. Then you really were here that night? Peter nodded. I've been saying that from the beginning. But Marcos didn't look relieved. On the contrary, he looked even more concerned. There's only one problem. Peter frowned. What? Marcos pointed to the image. That car entered the parking lot. He slid the video forward, The car parked. Peter and I got out and walked toward the side entrance. Carla paused the video. And after that, she moved the video again. The footage jumped several minutes ahead, but no one appeared leaving. No nurse, no doctor, no ambulance, nothing. Marcos looked directly at us. According to the cameras, you entered this hospital that night. He took a deep breath. But you never came out. The silence after the camera revelation was almost unbearable. You entered the hospital, but never left. Detective Marcos's words echoed in my head. Peter was still staring at the tablet screen. The video was paused. It clearly showed our car parking. Both of us getting out. Me holding my huge belly. Pregnant. Very pregnant. And then... nothing. No footage of us leaving. No nurse. No doctor. It was as if we had simply disappeared inside the hospital. That doesn't make sense, Peter finally said. Marcos nodded. I know. Carla slowly closed the tablet. That's why we need to check something. Peter looked up. What? Marcos answered. The place where Sabrina believes she gave birth. My heart began racing. I can show you, I said. Everyone looked at me. Do you remember the way? I hesitated. Because suddenly I wasn't so sure anymore. But some images were still clear in my mind. The hallway. The left turn. A white door. I think so. Marcos nodded. Then let's take a look. Stool. We left the meeting room. The hospital corridor seemed much longer now. The white lights reflected on the polished floor. Nurses hurried past. Some people spoke quietly. Everything looked completely normal. But to me, everything felt wrong. Peter walked beside me holding the baby's car seat. From time to time he looked at me, as if trying to figure out what I was thinking. The truth was, I didn't know either, because the more I thought about that night, the more confusing the memories became. Marcos walked a few steps ahead. Which way? He asked. I took a deep breath. This way. I pointed toward the maternity hallway. Roberto, the administrator, seemed nervous. This area was renovated a few years ago, he said. Some things may look different, but I knew that wasn't it. Something was very wrong. We walked for a few minutes, past exam rooms, patient rooms, a nurse station. Then something in my memory lit up. Here. Everyone stopped. I looked around. My heart started beating faster. I'm almost sure we passed through here. Marcos studied the corridor. Keep going. We walked a few more steps. Then I stopped again. There. I pointed to the left. It was down that hallway, but when we looked in that direction, everyone fell silent, because there was no hallway, only a wall, a white wall, smooth, no doors, no passage, nothing. I stared at that wall for several seconds, my brain trying to understand what was happening. No, I whispered. Peter frowned. What is it? The hallway was here. He looked again at the wall. Sabrina. I'm sure. My heart began racing. I remember turning here. Marcos walked to the wall, ran his hand across the surface. There's no opening here. Roberto looked confused. This part of the hospital has always been like this. Always? I asked. Yes. My stomach twisted. That's not possible. Carla pulled out the tablet again. She opened the hospital map. This is the current layout of the maternity ward. She zoomed in, showing exactly where we stood. Here, she said, then zoomed further. There is no hallway in that direction. Peter looked at me. Are you sure? I tried to remember. The delivery room, the lights, the doctor. But now something felt wrong. Very wrong. because the memory of the hallway was fading, like a dream that disappears when you try to recall it. "I remember," I said, but my voice no longer sounded confident. The baby began crying at that moment, a small frightened cry. Peter immediately started rocking him. "It's okay, champ," but I could barely hear him, because something very strange was happening inside my head. The more I tried to remember that night, the less sense everything made. Marcos looked directly at me. "Sabrina." "Yes? Is there anything else you remember?" I closed my eyes for a moment, and then something appeared in my mind. A quick image. A door, a sign. "Wait." Everyone looked at me. "I remember a door." "What door?" Carla asked. "A gray door." "Where?" "At the end of the hallway." Marcos looked again at the wall. "The hallway that doesn't exist?" "Yes." Silence returned. Then Roberto said something unexpected. "Actually," everyone looked at him. "What?" Marcos asked. Roberto hesitated. "There used to be a hallway there." My heart raced. "What?" "Years ago." Peter stepped closer. "What kind of hallway?" Roberto answered slowly. "It was part of the old emergency wing." "What happened to it?" "It was closed." "When?" Roberto thought for a moment. "About 6 years ago." Marcos frowned. "Closed how?" "It was sealed during a renovation." "And after that?" "The area was completely shut off." Peter looked again at the wall. "You mean," he pointed, "there's a hallway behind that?" Roberto nodded slowly. "Yes." Silence filled the space again, because we were all thinking the same thing. If Sabrina remembered a hallway that didn't exist, but once did, then someone could have taken her there. The Marcos looked directly at Roberto. "We need to open that wall." Roberto looked startled. "That's not so simple." "Why?" "Because that area was officially deactivated." "That doesn't matter." Marcos spoke firmly. "A woman gave birth in this hospital, and a baby disappeared that same night." He pointed to the wall. "And now we know there's a part of this hospital that no one has used for years." Carla crossed her arms. "Sounds like a good place to hide something." My heart began beating faster, because at that moment, I realized something. If there was a hidden hallway behind that wall, maybe that was where my delivery really happened. Maybe that was where everything began. Or worse, maybe that was where something terrible happened that night. The wall looked completely normal, white, smooth, without any marks. But now everyone knew something was behind it. An old corridor. A part of the hospital that had been sealed years ago. Marcos turned to Roberto. "We need to open this." The administrator looked nervous. "I don't have authorization to break a hospital wall." "Then get it," Marcos replied firmly. "Because if something happened here that night, we need to find out." Roberto hesitated for a few seconds. Then he picked up the phone. "I'll call maintenance." The 15 minutes later, 2 workers arrived with tools. Peter was still holding the baby. I was sitting in a chair in the hallway. My heart was beating far too fast. Something inside me said that opening that wall would change everything. The workers began. First removing a side panel, then breaking the plaster. The sound echoed down the hallway. Each hit louder, heavier, until finally, something appeared. A dark opening. An empty space behind the wall. A corridor. Yet the air that came out of that place was cold. Still, as if no one had entered for many years. One of the workers shined a flashlight inside. My God. Marcos took the flashlight. "Let's see." He stepped inside first, then Carla. Peter looked at me. "Can you walk?" I nodded. My legs were shaking, but I needed to see, needed to know. We entered the corridor. The place was covered in dust. Low ceiling, broken lamps, old equipment leaning against the walls. It looked like an abandoned part of the hospital, a forgotten place. But as we walked deeper, something started to feel strange, because the corridor didn't look that abandoned. There were marks on the floor, footprints. Marcos crouched down, ran his hand over the floor. "This isn't old." Carla stepped closer. "Someone has been here recently." My heart started beating even faster. Peter squeezed my hand. "It's okay," but I knew it wasn't. Because now I recognized the place, the curve of the corridor, the dim light, the door at the end. "There," I whispered. Everyone looked. A gray door stood at the end of the corridor, exactly like in my memory. "That's the room," I said. My voice trembled. It was here. Marcos slowly walked to the door. He pushed it open. The door creaked. And then, everyone froze. Because the room on the other side was not abandoned. There was no dust, no old equipment. On the contrary, it looked like an improvised medical room. A hospital bed, portable lights, medical instruments, boxes of medication. Everything organized, as if someone had used that place recently. Very recently. Carla looked around. "This doesn't make sense." Marcos looked shocked too. Who would build a secret delivery room inside a hospital? My heart began racing, because at that moment, a memory came rushing back, the light above my face, a voice saying, "Everything is fine, Sabrina. The baby is almost here." I leaned against the wall. It was here. Peter looked at me. "Are you sure?" "Yes." I pointed to the bed. I was right there. Silence fell over the room. Then Marcos noticed something on the floor. He crouched down, picked up a small object, an ID badge, covered in dust, but still readable. He slowly turned it over, and his expression changed. "That's impossible." Carla stepped closer. "What is it?" Marcos handed the badge to her. "Look at the name." Carla read it and froze completely. "Who is it?" Peter asked. Carla slowly lifted her eyes. "The doctor who performed the delivery." My heart raced. "Dr. Mendez." Carla nodded. "Yes, but something about her expression was strange." Peter noticed. "What is it?" Carla took a deep breath and said something that made the blood freeze in my veins. "Dr. Mendez." She swallowed hard. "Died 8 years ago." The silence inside the improvised room felt heavy. Too heavy. No one moved. No one spoke. Detective Carla's words still echoed in the air. "Dr. Mendez died 8 years ago." Peter was the first to react. "That can't be right." He looked at me. "Sabrina saw the doctor." I nodded immediately. "I remember him." The memories began returning more clearly. His face, his calm voice, his steady hands. "He was there," I said. "He was the one who delivered the baby." Marcos picked up the ID badge again. He studied it carefully. "This badge is old." "How old?" Peter asked. "At least 8 or 9 years." Carla crossed her arms. "After his death, the hospital canceled all his access credentials." Roberto looked completely disturbed. "I've worked here for 15 years. He looked around the room. "And I never knew this area was being used." Marcos slowly walked around the space, observing every detail. Someone built a clandestine delivery room inside this hospital. He pointed at the equipment, and they did it recently. Carla examined the medication boxes. Some of these drugs were manufactured this year. Peter ran his hand through his hair. So someone is operating here in secret. Exactly, Marcos said. But I could barely hear them, because something strange was happening inside my mind. Memories of that night were returning. Fragments, voices, lights, and something else. Something I hadn't noticed before. Wait, I murmured. Everyone looked at me. What is it? Peter asked. I closed my eyes, trying to reconstruct that night. There was someone else. Carla stepped closer. Someone else? Yes. Another doctor? No. The image became clearer. A woman. A nurse. Marcos immediately asked, "Can you describe her?" Blue uniform. Anything else? She was wearing a mask. And her face? I shook my head. I couldn't see it clearly. Carla looked at Marcos. It could be the same woman from the cameras at the other hospital, the kidnapped baby. My heart started racing again. Do you think it was her? I asked. Marcos answered slowly. It's possible. Peter looked again at the hospital bed. So let's put the pieces together. He pointed around the room. Someone kidnaps a baby from another hospital, then brings that baby here, to this secret room. Carla completed the thought, and gives it to you. Peter fell silent, because there was a question no one wanted to ask, but it was in everyone's mind. Where was our real baby? Marcos began examining the cabinets in the room. He opened a drawer. Inside were some old documents, medical papers, forms. He picked one up. We have something here. Carla quickly moved closer. What is it? Marcos showed the document. It was a medical record. It looks like a birth record. My heart began racing. Whose? Marcos read the name, but his expression changed. That's strange. What? Peter asked. Marcos turned the paper and showed it to everyone. The name written on the form was Sabrina, my name. That's mine, I said immediately. Carla examined the document. Yes. Correct date. Time of delivery. My heart pounded. So there is a record. But Marcos slowly shook his head. There's a problem. What? Peter asked. He pointed to another line on the document. It says something that doesn't make sense. Peter stepped closer. What? Marcos read aloud. Newborn transferred. The silence filled the room. Transferred? I repeated. To where? Peter asked. Marcos flipped the page, but there was nothing else. The line was incomplete. No hospital, no doctor, no signature. Carla looked more concerned by the second. That means the baby, she looked at me, did not stay with you after the birth. My world seemed to collapse in that moment. No, that's not true. Peter placed his hand on my shoulder. Calm down. But I could feel something terrible growing inside my mind. A possibility I didn't want to accept. If the baby was transferred. My voice came out weak. Then the baby we brought home. Carla finished the sentence. Is not the baby you gave birth to. And the baby began crying at that moment. A loud, frightened cry. Peter picked him up immediately, trying to calm him. But something strange happened. Marcos was staring at the baby, with a very serious expression. Wait, he said. Carla looked at him. What is it? Marcos pointed at the baby. I've seen this child before. Silence fell again. Peter frowned. Where? Marcos took a deep breath and said something no one expected. This isn't the only baby who disappeared that night. The baby's crying echoed through the improvised room. Peter held him in his arms, trying to calm him. "It's okay. It's okay." But the baby remained restless. Maybe he could feel the tension in the air. Maybe he was just hungry. Or maybe the weight of the situation made everything feel more intense. Marcos kept staring at him, as if he were trying to remember something. "You said you've seen this child before," Carla said. Marcos nodded slowly. "Yes." Peter frowned. "Where?" The detective took a deep breath. "In the police report." Silence returned. "What report?" I asked. Marcos answered calmly. "The case of the baby who disappeared from St. Lucas Hospital." "We already know that," Peter said. But Marcos shook his head. "No. You don't know everything." Carla looked at him. "Marcos." But he continued. "That night." He looked again at the baby. More than one child disappeared. My heart seemed to stop. "What?" Carla sighed. "We didn't release that information publicly." Peter stood completely still. "How many?" Marcos answered. "2." Silence fell over the room like a stone. 2 babies disappeared that night. My world seemed to spin. 2? Carla nodded. "Yes. A boy. And a girl." Peter held the baby tighter against his chest. "Which one is this?" Marcos answered. "We don't know yet." Roberto looked completely shocked. 2 babies kidnapped on the same night? Carla nodded. "It was one of the strangest cases we've ever investigated." Marcos continued. "The cameras showed a woman dressed as a nurse entering the maternity ward. But after that, she disappeared." Peter took a deep breath. "So you think this woman brought one of the babies here? To this secret room? And placed him in Sabrina's arms?" Carla replied. "It's a possibility." Tears began forming in my eyes. "But why?" No one answered, because no one knew. Marcos looked again at the document found in the room, the medical record with my name. "Sabrina gave birth here. That's a fact." Carla agreed. "The document confirms it." Peter asked immediately, "Then where is our baby?" Marcos flipped the page again, searching for something. Any clue. But there was only that sentence. "Newborn transferred." "Transferred where?" I asked. Marcos sighed. "We don't know." Carla began searching through the other drawers, opening boxes, flipping through papers. There must be more records here. Suddenly she stopped. "Wait." Everyone looked at her. She pulled out a small notebook from inside a box. "What is that?" Peter asked. Carla slowly opened it. "It looks like a medical journal." Marcos stepped closer. "Read it." Carla turned a few pages. The handwriting was rushed, almost illegible. But there were dates, times, and names. She began reading aloud. "Patient transferred to alternative room. Procedure performed outside the system." My heart was racing. "This is insane," Roberto murmured. Carla turned another page, then her expression changed. "My God. What is it?" Marcos asked. Carla pointed at the page. "Here." Marcos read it. His face turned serious. Very serious. Peter noticed immediately. "What does it say?" Marcos answered slowly. "There's a list of births performed in this room." "How many?" Carla asked. "At least 6. Silence filled the room. "6 women?" I asked. Marcos nodded. "All within the last 2 years." My heart began racing again. "What happened to the babies?" Marcos turned a few more pages. Then he found something. There are notes. He began reading. Newborn transferred. Newborn transferred. Newborn transferred. He stopped. Peter asked, "Transferred where?" Marcos answered quietly, "It doesn't say." The baby began crying again, louder this time. Peter gently rocked him. "It's okay." But now no one believed that. Carla kept flipping through the notebook. Suddenly she froze. "Marcos." "What?" She turned the notebook toward him. "Look at this page." Marcos stepped closer, read quickly, then lifted his eyes toward me. "Sabrina." My heart raced. "What is it?" He answered, "There's a note about you." "What does it say?" Marcos took a deep breath and read aloud. "Patient was not supposed to survive the procedure." The air left my lungs. "What?" Peter turned pale. "Say that again." Marcos read it once more. "Patient was not supposed to survive the procedure." The silence became heavy, because now there was a new question, a far more terrifying one. If I wasn't supposed to survive, then who planned that birth? And why? The silence inside the room felt suffocating. The words written in that notebook still echoed in my mind. Patient was not supposed to survive the procedure. Peter was the first to react. "This is absurd." He grabbed the notebook from Marcos's hands. This must be some kind of mistake. But the more he read, the paler he became. "There are several notes here," he said. Carla stepped closer again. "Let me see." Peter handed her the notebook. Carla slowly flipped through the pages. Then she took a deep breath. "This isn't a mistake." "What do you mean?" I asked. Carla looked up at me. "These notes look planned." My heart started racing. "Planned?" Marcos answered. "Like a protocol. A plan." Peter frowned. "A plan for what?" Marcos pointed to another line in the notebook. "Read this." Peter looked. His expression changed instantly. "No." "What?" I asked. Peter turned the notebook toward me. The sentence was written just below my name. "Healthy newborn, priority transfer." My stomach twisted. "Transfer to where?" Marcos answered, "That's the question." Carla crossed her arms. "But now we know one thing." "What?" Peter asked. "Sabrina's delivery was not an accident." My heart raced. "Then what was it?" Carla answered slowly. "Most likely, an operation." Roberto looked completely lost. "An operation? Inside the hospital?" Marcos nodded. "Yes." He pointed at the equipment in the room. Everything here was set up to operate outside the official system. Peter looked around. "A clandestine room." "Exactly," Marcos said. Carla turned another page in the notebook. "There are records of other births. 6 women, all outside the system." My heart started beating even faster. What happened to them? Carla didn't answer immediately. She kept reading, then slowly closed the notebook. "There are no discharge records." Silence fell again. Peter understood first. "You're saying that..." He swallowed. "These women disappeared?" Marcos answered calmly. "It's possible." I felt the world spinning. But I survived. Everyone looked at me. "Yes," Marcos said. "You survived. Which means something went wrong." Peter squeezed my hand. "Or something went right." Marcos shook his head. "Depends on which side you're on." "Ino iinar." At that moment, the baby began crying again. Louder this time. Peter picked him up carefully. "It's okay." But Marcos kept staring at the baby, thoughtful. There's still something that doesn't make sense. Carla asked, "What?" "If the plan was to take the baby," he pointed at me, "why leave the mother alive?" Peter answered immediately, "Maybe that wasn't the plan." Marcos frowned. "Explain." Peter looked at me, then at the baby. "Maybe someone changed the plan." Silence returned. Carla seemed to consider the idea. "A nurse, or the doctor." Roberto intervened. "But the doctor died 8 years ago." Marcos replied, "Or someone used his name." Suddenly, a noise echoed in the hallway. Everyone froze. Footsteps. Fast. Running. Carla immediately grabbed her radio. "We have someone in the corridor." Marcos instinctively turned off the flashlight. "Stay quiet." The baby was still crying. Peter tried to calm him, but the footsteps were getting closer. Much closer. And then, the door to the room began to move. Very slowly, as if someone were opening it carefully. My heart felt like it would jump out of my chest. The door opened a few inches. A shadow appeared on the other side. Marcos moved into position immediately. "Police." Silence. The shadow froze. For a few seconds, no one breathed. Then the door opened completely, and everyone was shocked, because the person standing there was not a stranger. It was a nurse, wearing a blue uniform, exactly like in my memory. She slowly raised her hands, but her eyes were fixed on me. "I finally found you," she said. My heart stopped. "I recognize you." She took a step forward. "I was in that room when your baby was born." Silence filled the room again. Peter held the baby tighter. Marcos immediately asked, "Who are you?" The woman answered in a low voice, but firm. "The only person who tried to save your child." The silence inside the room felt almost unbearable. Everyone was staring at the nurse standing in the doorway. She still had her hands raised, but her eyes were fixed on me. "I remember you," I said, almost in a whisper. The image was finally clear in my mind. She had been in the delivery room, standing beside the doctor. The woman slowly nodded. "Yes." Peter held the baby tighter against his chest. "Who are you?" Marcos asked. The nurse replied, "My name is Laura." Carla stepped forward. "Laura what?" "Laura Farias." "Do you work in this hospital?" Laura let out a small, bitter laugh. "I used to, until 2 years ago." Roberto frowned. "I've never seen you here." "Because after I started asking questions," she looked around the improvised room. "I was fired." Silence filled the room again. Marcos asked, "What kind of questions?" Laura pointed to the notebook on the table. "About this. About these secret births." Peter looked directly at her. "You were here when my son was born?" Laura nodded. "Yes." My heart started racing. "Then you know what happened." She took a deep breath. "I do." Carla crossed her arms. "Then start talking." Laura looked first at me, then at the baby in Peter's arms. "Before anything else," she said carefully, "this baby is not your child." My heart seemed to stop again. Peter clenched his jaw. "We already know that." Laura shook her head. "No." "You think you know?" The silence became heavy. "What do you mean by that?" Marcos asked. Laura answered slowly. "The baby who disappeared from the other hospital." She pointed to the little one in Peter's arms. "Is not this one." Carla frowned. "But the birthmark behind the ear." Laura nodded. "It was placed there." Everyone froze. "Placed?" Peter repeated. "Yes. An artificial mark." My heart raced. "Why?" Laura answered. to confuse the investigation. Marcos stepped forward. Then explain. Who was behind this? Laura looked toward the dark corridor, as if making sure no one else was listening. Then she spoke. For years, an illegal network has been operating inside several hospitals. A network that kidnaps newborn babies. Roberto looked horrified. That's impossible. Laura replied, not if the right people are involved. Marcos asked, who? Laura answered, doctors, administrators, and people with a lot of money. Carla became completely serious. Baby trafficking. Laura nodded. Exactly. Peter looked stunned. But why bring my wife here? Laura answered while looking directly at me. Because you weren't on the list. List? Yes. She picked up the notebook from the table. All the women here were chosen. No close family. No complete medical history. People no one would look for. My stomach twisted. Then why me? Laura took a deep breath. Because someone made a mistake. Silence filled the room again. What mistake? Marcos asked. Laura replied, you were not supposed to be brought here. My heart started racing. What? Your name was confused with another patient's. Peter went completely rigid. So my wife was kidnapped by mistake? Laura nodded. Yes. And when they realized the mistake, it was already too late. Carla asked immediately, and the baby? Laura looked at me again. Your baby was born healthy? Tears filled my eyes. Then where is he? Laura took a few seconds before answering. Then she said something that made the air disappear from my lungs. I took him. Silence exploded through the room. Peter reacted first. You did what? Laura remained calm. I knew that place wasn't safe. Babies were being taken from there. Sold. My heart pounded. So you took my son? Laura nodded. Yes. To save him. Marcos immediately asked, where is he now? Laura answered firmly. In a safe place. Peter looked torn between anger and hope. You expect us to believe that? Laura stepped forward. I have proof. Carla asked. What kind of proof? Laura took something out of her pocket. A small envelope. Inside was a photograph. She handed it to me. My hands trembled as I took it. It was a photo of a baby, a newborn, wrapped in a white blanket. My heart stopped. Because that baby had exactly the same eyes as Peter. This is your son, Laura said. Tears began falling. He's alive. Silence filled the room. Peter placed a hand on my shoulder. Sabrina. I looked at the photo again. My son. Somewhere. Safe, but still far from me. Then Marcos asked the question everyone was thinking. If the baby is safe, he looked at Laura. Then why did you come back now? Laura took a deep breath and said something that sent a chill down my spine. Because they found out I took him. Silence fell again. Then she finished. And now, they're coming to take the baby back. The silence inside the room felt unbearably heavy. Laura's words still echoed in the air. They found out that I took the baby. Peter was the first to react. Who? Laura answered without hesitation. The people behind this network. Marcos frowned. Do you know who they are? Laura nodded. Yes. Carla stepped forward. Then tell us. Laura took a deep breath. It's not just a small group. It's an organization. Doctors, hospital administrators, and intermediaries who sell the babies. Roberto turned completely pale. That's impossible. Laura looked directly at him. Do you really think a room like this could exist inside the hospital without internal help? The silence answered for him. Peter held the baby tighter. So we're in danger. Laura nodded slowly. Yes, Marcos asked. Do they know you're here? Laura answered honestly. Probably. I stole something from them. Carla crossed her arms. A baby. Laura shook her head. Not just that. She pulled something from her pocket. A small flash drive. All the evidence. Records. Names. Bank accounts. Transactions. Marcos grabbed the device immediately. This could bring down the entire network. Laura replied, That's why I had to come back. And suddenly, a sound echoed in the hallway. Footsteps, several, fast. Everyone froze. Carla grabbed her weapon. Police. Marcos turned off the flashlight again. Stay quiet. The baby started moving. Peter rocked him gently. Easy. Easy. But the footsteps were getting closer. Very fast. Then a male voice echoed from outside. We know you're in there, Laura. My heart raced. Laura went completely rigid. They're here. Marcos slowly approached the door. How many? Laura answered in a low voice. At least 3. Carla positioned herself against the wall. We're armed. Laura replied. So are they. The voice in the hallway spoke again. Laura, you made a mistake. But you can still fix this. No one answered. Then the man continued. Hand over the baby. Peter clenched his teeth. Not happening. The voice laughed. We're not talking about the baby you have there. Silence returned. We're talking about the real baby. My heart pounded. They know, I whispered. Laura nodded. Yes. Marcos spoke quietly. How? Laura replied, They always track the babies. Always. And then, something unexpected happened. Another sound echoed in the hallway. This time, more footsteps, but different, heavier, more organized. Carla smiled slightly. Finally. Marcos looked at her. What is it? Carla replied. I called for backup when we entered this area. At that moment, a new voice echoed down the hallway. Police! Nobody move! The sound of people running. Shouting. Confusion. Someone trying to escape. Then, silence. A few seconds later, 2 police officers appeared at the door. Area secure. Marcos stepped outside first. How many? 3 men detained. Carla let out a breath of relief. Good. But Laura didn't look relieved. She was staring at the floor. Thoughtful. Marcos noticed. What is it? Laura answered slowly. They weren't the leaders. Just intermediaries. My heart tightened again. Then who is? Laura lifted her eyes and said something that shocked everyone. The leader. She slowly pointed toward Roberto, the hospital administrator. Is in this room. Silence exploded. Peter turned immediately. Roberto was standing near the door, pale, sweating. Marcos reacted instantly. Roberto. He placed a hand on his weapon. Don't move. But it was too late. Roberto ran for the exit. He's running, Carla shouted. The officers began chasing him down the dark corridor. The sound of footsteps echoed. Then, a shout, and the sound of someone being thrown to the ground. Marcos sighed. They got him. The room fell silent again. Peter was still holding the baby. I was still holding the photo of my son. Laura slowly approached, "It's over." But Marcos replied, "Not yet." He looked at me. "We still need to find your baby." My heart raced. "You said he's safe?" Laura nodded. "Yes." Peter asked, "Where?" Laura took a deep breath and answered, "I can take you to him." The room was finally silent. After the chase in the corridor, 2 police officers returned, pushing Roberto forward in handcuffs. The hospital administrator looked completely different now. The confidence was gone. Only fear remained. Marcos watched him carefully. "Roberto Almeida, you are under arrest for suspected kidnapping, human trafficking, and participation in a criminal organization." Roberto didn't respond. He only looked at Laura, with anger. "You destroyed everything." Laura answered calmly. "No. I just stopped you from continuing." The officers escorted Roberto out of the room. The echo of their footsteps slowly disappeared into the abandoned corridor. For the first time since everything began, it felt like the immediate threat had passed. But my heart was still racing, because there was something far more important. My son. I looked at Laura. "You said you know where he is." She nodded. "Yes." Peter stepped closer too. "Then let's go." Marcos agreed. "I'm coming with you." Carla grabbed her radio. "We'll send a team as well." Laura took a deep breath. "It's not far from here." I had to keep him close, in case something went wrong. The 20 minutes later, we were in Laura's car. The city was quiet that night. Streetlights passed quickly across the windows. Peter sat beside me in the back seat, still holding the baby we had brought home. He seemed calmer now, sleeping deeply. Even though he wasn't our biological child, something inside me still felt affection for him. Maybe because he was also a victim of all of this. Laura drove in silence. Marcos sat in the passenger seat. "How long has he been with you?" I asked. 3 days. Since the birth. My heart tightened. "Is he okay?" Laura smiled slightly. "Very well. Strong. Healthy. And loud when he wants to be." Tears began forming in my eyes. "Sounds like his father." Peter squeezed my hand. The car finally stopped. It was a small house, simple, on a quiet street. Laura turned off the engine. "We're here." My heart felt like it would burst out of my chest. My hands were trembling. Peter held my shoulder. "Everything will be okay." Laura opened the door to the house. We went inside. The house was quiet, but there was something there. A small sound, familiar. A soft cry coming from another room. My heart raced. "He's awake," Laura said. My legs could barely move. Each step felt heavy, until we reached a small bedroom. A soft light illuminated the room. There was a crib in the corner, and inside it, a baby, small, moving his arms slowly. Laura stepped closer. She carefully picked up the baby, then turned toward me. "Sabrina." She placed the baby in my arms. "This is your son." The world seemed to stop. I looked at the tiny face, the eyes, the nose, the soft breathing. He slowly opened his eyes. And in that moment, I felt something impossible to explain. An immediate connection. Instinctive. As if my heart had finally found the missing piece. Tears began to fall. "My son." Peter stepped closer. His eyes were full of tears, too. "He's beautiful." Laura smiled. "I promised I would protect him." Marcos watched in silence. "You saved more than just a baby." A few minutes later, the police cars arrived. The investigation would continue for weeks. The network would be dismantled. Several hospitals would be investigated. But at that moment, none of that mattered. Because I was sitting in that small chair, holding my son for the first time. Peter placed his hand over mine. He's safe now. I nodded. And in that moment, I realized something. That story began with fear, with confusion, with lies. But it ended with something far stronger, the truth, and the love of a family that was finally complete.